Okay, we're going to start Chapter 7, Topics 6, 7, and 8, which have to do with the evidence of evolution. All right, as scientists, we really focus on evidence. You know, we don't just kind of like make some observations and guess, okay? So when we talk about the evidence of evolution, we're going to look at some things that we can actually point to and say, oh, this shows that what we think about evolution is actually happening. Okay, that's kind of a really, really big deal. So what are some of the pieces of evidence? Okay, first of all, it's not like the evidence is weak. There's overwhelming evidence from multiple areas that evolution is happening. And you'll notice I have the word theory here, okay? In science, theory means this is our best understanding of how it works, okay? In everyday conversation, theory means like, I have a guess. Like if I say, I have a theory that my boyfriend is cheating on me. That doesn't really mean you, in everyday language, that might mean like, I think I know what's going on, but I'm not sure, okay? In science, theory means this is our best understanding supported by evidence, okay? Like the theory of gravity is like, well, this is why we think gravity works. The law of gravity is this is what gravity does. It doesn't even say how it works. It just says this is what it does. Okay, theory of gravity is like, what does gravity have a particle? What does gravity do? Yes, yes, they kind of marry together, mesh together. All right. So what are the big sources of this evidence? First one, probably the coolest one out there, is the fossil record. We can look at how life has changed over millions of years, okay? Second one is comparative morphology. This is like looking at the shapes and structures on a molecular level and on a gross level, like an anatomical level. In my anatomy class I used to teach, we dissect cats, and everyone's like, they're so different from humans. They're not, okay? They have all the organs that you have. Some of them slightly different places, but they all do the same things. They're pretty much the same. You're not that different than a cat, okay? How many bones are in the upper arm? 1. How many are in the forearm? 2. How many does a frog have in its upper arm? 1. How many does it have in its 2? Okay. How many bones does a bird have in its upper wing and leg? You ever eat wings at BW3s? 1. How many does it have down here? 2. Okay. So you have the same shape as a frog and a chicken. Okay. Yeah, what am I trying to say? All right. Next one, biogeography. This is looking at the distributions of species across the globe, like the finches on the island and many other things as well. These marry together many times. Fossils show us morphology. Fossils show us biogeography, okay? So they're not all like independent of each other. They all kind of flow together into this wonderful body of evidence. All right. So what are fossils? Fossils are either the actual remains. So if I go out and find a really, really old bone, that's technically a fossil, okay? It can also be traces, okay? Animal tracks. It could be their waste, okay? We talked about fossilized poop, all right? It can also be bones that made an impression, okay? So lots of things. Most of them are pressed into rocks, but sometimes they can be inside of amber, which are some of the coolest ones out there. Amber is little tree sap that bleeds off of trees. It's very sticky. Bugs will get into it. It turns into like a almost, it's like plastic, like a golden plastic. Amber is actually used in jewelry. If you remember Jurassic Park, remember that cane the guy had with the bug in it? And mosquito. All right. He had a cane with an amber ball on the top that had a bug in it. Where did they get the dinosaur DNA in Jurassic Park? Mosquitoes that were sucking dinosaur blood. All right. So, some other things fossils do. We can carbon-14 or other radiometric ways of dating them to see how old they are. In very general terms, the deeper a fossil is, the older it is. If I find fossil A on the bottom, and then rock layer, and then fossil B up top, A is usually much older than B, depending on the difference in those depths. There are rare geologic things that will flip over rock layers, but geologists are smart enough to know what they are, and it's very rare, okay? If you ever drive across the state, especially on the east side of the state, where there are more hills, you'll see where the hills have been cut away. You'll see all those layers, okay? So geologists are pretty good at figuring that stuff out. What else does it tell us? Well, you find fossils in places. The places you find them, it's significant, okay? If we find a whole bunch of fossils for some certain species here, and then we find them on another continent, that might tell us that at one time that was one single population. Okay. You can kind of see some really well-known fossils here in the art, in the pictures below. I'm going to go through some of the most coolest fossils out there. Okay? This first one is two dinosaurs fighting each other. For something like this to happen, they have to pretty much be killed together instantly. How did they get fossilized? They were fighting and a landslide fell on them. Okay? So most fossils aren't this level of cool. It's just like, here is one little bone from something. Okay? Here is one little leaf. These are sort of like the greatest of all time. All right? Things like this are very cool because we can actually see, like, how did they move? What was going on here? Who was winning the fight? Are there tooth marks in the bones? Okay? This is a mother dinosaur sitting on its eggs. The skull is missing, but very, very cool stuff to see. Like, what does this tell us? It tells us animal behavior, okay? Some animals just lay their eggs, walk away, and that's it. Well, dinosaurs didn't really do that, okay? So, everybody, that's pretty cool. Animal behavior can be seen in fossils. This isn't really a fossil, but it's a recreation of one that we found. This one was from India. They found a boa constrictor-like snake wrapping around dinosaur eggs to squeeze them. We're not sure if it was waiting for them to be born or what. Snakes don't fossilize very often, so this is kind of cool, okay? I couldn't find the actual picture of the fossil, but I found like a picture from a museum that shows what the fossil showed. All right? Reptile on reptile. These turtles were caught in the act and frozen in this moment for all time. Okay? So, what a way to go. They have some kind of, these turtles absorbed oxygen through their skin, and they moved to a layer of a lake that was low on oxygen. That's what the theory is. Okay? Maybe they were out of breath. I don't know. All right. This one here is very cool. This is a mother giving birth. And you can see they found her with one baby inside of her one halfway born and one on the outside. I don't remember what happened to her. Okay? Ichthyosaurus, okay? Pretty much fish dinosaur. All right. This one is very cool. So this is a flying dinosaur. You've probably seen something dactyls. There's different types of them. I don't want to say which one it is because I don't remember. It's holding its prey. So we think that this thing swooped down over the water and grabbed a fish. While it was swooping over the water, the bigger fish grabbed the flying dinosaur. So you have a fish catching a fish eater, okay? So the flying guy right here has, you can't really see it, but it's got like a fish in its claws. And then this big guy on the right here jumped up and grabbed the flying dinosaur. So there are three organisms here at once, and they all kind of died together. Yeah, this is where you would have that long, and all that would be all that sort of skin membrane, okay? All right, anyone ever see this one before? This one shows up on social media all the time. This is a megalodon tooth, and this is a whale vertebrae. Now, this is fake, okay? This is often listed as the most awesome fossil in existence, but those were actually found in different locations, and people will say they have been artistically joined to represent, because megalodons really did eat whales, okay? But they didn't find them together. What'd you say? They are individual real fossils, but the combination's not real. Now listen, we know this happened because we find whale bones with megalodon scars on them. Okay, but we've never found them like stuck together like that. And you can buy all kinds of reproductions of fossils like this if you want to. You can even buy, you know how you can get like granite countertops and stuff? You can buy granite with fossils in it and have it put on your countertops and have like a little fish show up, and pretty cool stuff. All right. So let's move on to comparative morphology. You've probably learned this already, so it's going to be a really quick review. All right. Comparative morphology is where you analyze the structure of things that are alive and compare them to things that are extinct or just things that are still alive, okay? So there's a couple ways to do this. Homology. Homo means same, and we're looking at the same form here, okay? So these are characteristics in related species that have similarity even if the function is different, okay? Your arm and a penguin's wing and a bird wing all have the same homology, okay? Single bone humerus, radius ulna, and lower arm. They all have very different functions. A penguin's wing is meant for swimming. An eagle's wing is meant for flying. Your arm is specialized for manipulating things and climbing, okay? And living in trees. Seriously, okay? Then you have vestigial structures. These are things that are conserved even though they no longer have a use. Can anyone name two of them in humans? Appendix, tailbone. Tonsils still do some things, okay? They're part of your lymphatic system. Good guess, though. There are tiny muscles connected to your ears that don't work, okay? They're so small they don't do anything. In other animals, they can direct the ear in certain directions. Have you ever seen animals that can like move their ears around and point them toward what they want to listen to? Horses do it really well, okay? Horses will face their ears forward and then they can turn them behind themselves. You can tell which way a horse is looking by which way its ears are pointing. Oh, sorry. All right. So vestigial structures, they're actually listed up there, even though I just asked them to you. There they are. All right. Yeah, nobody looks at anything, right? All right. Molecular homology. This is where we take a sequence of DNA in you or a dandelion or whatever, and we compare it to the sequence of DNA in another living thing. Okay? If you remember, we used something called BLAST to kind of, you can look up just humans, but you can also take a sequence of DNA from humans and see how much of it is in a fox or whatever, okay? Yes, I will. So we can do this and say like, well, we know that a lot of aquatic mammals are out there, like dolphins and whales and things like that. So like, mammals didn't start in water, so like what was the original ancestor to those things? And we can use molecular homology to do that. We think it was something that looked like a weasel. I saw a service now where you can get your dog's DNA, send it away to see what its breed really, really is. I think it's less than $100 if you really want to know who your dog's ancestors are. You good over there? Okay. Let's take a look at some homologous structures, okay? You've got your frog here, which we talked about. You've got your lizard here. You've got your bird, human, cat, whale, and what's this? A bat, okay? Everybody on this illustration here, and I've been kind of leading up to this the whole time, has a humerus, a radius ulna, a bundle of carpals, and they all have 5 digits. Okay, well, not all of them. The bird doesn't. But most of them have 5 digits. Okay? So you kind of see this like homology where once evolution comes up with a plan, it can't just like start from scratch and say like, you know what we really need? We need an extra humerus. That'll make it so they can really reach out and do something. Instead of putting an extra, they have to work with what it's got. So instead of like, oh, I'll just evolve a whole new bone, they take the humerus and either stretch it out, thicken it, shorten it, lighten it. So if you're going to fly, you're going to have a really, really light humerus. If you need a paddle, you're going to have a really, really wide humerus to kind of catch the water with. And so you see that this pattern shows up in all these different things. So that means all these different creatures have a common body plan, common ancestors, okay? Almost all higher animals have some sort of cord that goes down the middle and 4 limbs, okay? Everything Those are all they all have one common ancestor. Okay, even fish have the same sort of body plan. All right. A lot of times snakes will have a vestigial pelvis. So we know at one time they had legs. Whales have a vestigial pelvis. There's this little set of bones that don't do anything. Whales don't really have like flippers in the back, okay? All right. So what do we see here, okay? There's convergent evolution, and this is where we see similar adaptations that evolve in things that are distantly related, okay? So an example of this would be whale flippers look very, very close to fish flippers, okay? So they have converged on the same solution, okay? And then you have analogous, okay? Analogous structures, okay? Analogous structures have totally separate origins, okay? Totally separate origins, okay? The wings in birds versus bats and bees, okay? All these things can fly, but they don't have a common ancestor. So the structure for bee wings is totally different than the structure for bird wings. The way they solve that problem is totally different. So if I tell you an analogy, if I say, you know, running a marathon is an analogy for life, okay? Those are two totally different situations. Okay, so that's how I remember analogous. Okay. Here's another analogous structure. Bees can sting you with a venom. Snakes can inject you with a venom. Okay? The bee stinger evolved from a little hook to cut open tree branches to lay eggs. Okay? That's why only female insects sting. All right, back to this. When we look at things on a cellular level, we also see this. A lot of times we forget to look on a cellular level. We see all eukaryotes that have some similar cellular processes and structures. They all have organelles in a membrane. They have linear chromosomes. They have introns in their genes that are edited out. They all have a mitochondria. They all use ribosomes. Okay? Your ribosomes could make bacterial proteins, and a bacteria's ribosomes could make human proteins. So this stuff happens on a cellular level as well. All right, everybody feeling caught up? All right, the next piece of evidence that we're going to use is biogeography. Okay? And this is where we see how animals and plants are distributed across the globe. Okay? Think about it like this. What are most of the mammals in Australia known for? Kangaroos, possums, marsupials, okay? Known for. Okay. So, the marsupial reproductive plan, which is where you have babies are born very, very small and sort of non-developed, and then they attach in a pouch and all that sort of thing. That really took off in Australia, probably because some marsupial mammal colonized Australia, and that was a very successful line for mammals in that part of the world. There aren't very many marsupials in North America. Now, there's one right here in Ohio, the possum, right? But in Australia, there's so many different types, okay? So that's an example of biogeography, okay? Some things on the same continent are very similar and distinct from species on other continents. So that would be an example. Those are more closely related than, say, like North American white-tailed deer and things like that. So we see this sort of thing. One of the problems with an interconnected world is we are spreading things across the globe outside of their native habitats, okay? They're invasive species, okay? Things that didn't develop on that continent are introduced either accidentally or on purpose. Another Australian example is cane toads. Sugarcane is a really big cash crop in Australia. They brought these toads in to try and eat insects, and they have like reproduced on an epic scale, and they have some pretty bad ecological consequences. So they have these huge toads that just like reproduce in the thousands, okay? Like you can drive down the road and there's just hundreds of toads on the road. Ooh. All right, let's do a quick review, see if you can answer these. What are the three big areas? Fossils, geography, comparative morphology. Okay, very good. And how can structures become vestigial? Why do we have an appendix? In terms of natural selection, okay, does anybody know what an appendix does in animals where it's not vestigial?
Was it the appendix for like breaking down certain compounds?
Yeah, so like rabbits have a really big appendix and it's full of bacteria that breaks down cellulose, okay? We don't really digest cellulose anymore, so ours isn't very useful. And so it doesn't really hurt us or help us, okay? If everybody started dying of appendicitis before they reproduced, it would probably keep getting selected and selected and selected to be smaller, okay? Right now, appendicitis is not very rare, and with surgery and medical treatment, it's very survivable. So it's just kind of there, okay? It's not useful, it's not harmful. If they're harmful, they'll leave the gene pool. If you're listening to my video, I think we're having some sort of music play on the announcements. There's not much we can do about it. All right. So it may have been useful at one time, but there's either a mutation or a selection pressure that makes it more useless. So it's still conserved, and it's not selected for or against. All right, so last slide. If we were going to summarize everything here, populations are still evolving genomes are still changing. Okay? We have modern evidence for evolution. Antibiotic resistance in bacteria. Insects becoming resistant to pesticides. Okay? Pathogens cause new emerging diseases. This was written before coronavirus, this PowerPoint I'm using. Okay? So we have all these different things happening. Anytime there's a new pathogen, there's usually some in the population that are just naturally immune to it. If coronavirus was more deadly, it could really change the way the human population looks. Okay? Especially if it hit in a time without modern medicine. So there are pathogens and plagues in animal populations all the time that change their gene pool. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end my